Hello, everybody. I'm here with book blogger Kriti Khare. That is pronounced correct, right?
You're doing okay, yeah.
Okay. Yes. So she was kind enough to interview me after I released the first Jessica Kincaid novel, and I had a lot of fun doing it. So I thought I would invite her to be part of the stream for August. And, it'd be nice to actually have a guest for once instead of just me ranting for like half an hour. So, Kriti, do you want to tell us a bit about your blog and what you've been up to?
Sure. Thank you so much for having me.
No problem.
So, I got into book blogging like seriously in July, so I'm pretty new to it still. And I'm having a lot of fun. I'm reading way more than I've ever read. I'm pretty sure I'm breaking all my records of reading in a year.
Oh, really? That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've ever since I've been sort of building more connections in the literary community, I've been doing a lot of reading, especially since the last couple of years I didn't read as much as I used to. Like I used to be like a devourer of books back in the day when I was like a teenager and in my 20s. I'd go through one in like a week, like a big 500-page one. But my eyesight kind of got bad, so reading became painful. So I had to kind of, pace myself because I actually had to do other forms of work throughout the day, then, not overtire my eyes. But I've been reading at a slightly slower pace in the last year or so. I've come across a lot of interesting books. So do you want to share a couple of the ones that you've really enjoyed so far?
Um, so, yeah, so far I've really enjoyed the first one that started writing about. That was What We See in the Smoke.
Yeah.
Uh, and it was amazing because it's pretty much a collection of short stories. It's by Ben Berman Khan, and he just takes us through from different perspectives, like what's happening in 2016 all the way up to like what happens in 3026.
Oh, that sounds really neat.
Yeah, it was really neat. And for me, when I was interviewing him, I was telling him that it was like a mystery to me. Like, who is this character who's speaking and where are they? Because that was one of the big mysteries in his short stories. At least that's what I found, that often there would be different characters. Often they would have almost ended up somewhere else when you see them again, and you wouldn't even know that they were there, or they might appear in someone else's story. It was just very fascinating. It's a book that I would definitely reread at some point in time.
Awesome. Yeah. So like it's the same person's perspective throughout the entire like every point of view is this one person's point of view. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's not. That's what I'm saying is there's so many people, and some of them they're not even people who are narrating these short stories.
Oh, okay. So like it might be like a piece of software or something.
Yeah, it can be.
That's pretty cool. It kind
Yeah,
of reminds me of, have you seen that movie Cloud Atlas?
I have not, but I will write that down so that I check it out.
Yeah.
What
And
is that about?
basically it's kind of interesting. There's it's made by the Wachowskis, so the same people who made The Matrix, and it's there are multiple point of views, and they start in the past, like I think around the year 1000, and they move forward to like I want to say around the year 3000, and each you're seeing multiple different lives at the same time. So like you're seeing something that happens in the year 1653, and then you're seeing something that happens in 1978, and then you're seeing things happen in like 2542. And then the thing that happened in 1650, you start to see by the end of the movie, the thing that happened in 1653 influenced the thing that happened in 1978, which influenced the thing that happened in 2542. And like it's this whole tapestry that kind of comes together, but you don't really get that to the end of the movie.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah, the Wachowskis are really good. So
I'm
uh,
finding though that there's like so many books like that right now that I'm reading. The one
yeah.
that I recently finished, and plan to write about on my blog next. It's called The Psychology of Time Travel.
Yeah.
And it was also very fascinating because in that book, we have figured out time travel. We know how to time travel. And
Okay.
it's about a bunch of people who can time travel and how that affects like back and forth because they can go to the past, but and they can go to the future as well, but they can only go as far back as when the machine was invented. And
Right. Okay.
yeah, and the other part of it was um, time traveling was very much like being an astronaut. It was a profession.
Cool.
Yeah, that was a fascinating one too. But again, because of the whole timelines, like what happened in the future and what happened in the past and how all that was affected, there were times when I was like, I need to draw something to make
Oh,
sense.
you need a flow chart.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that sounds really neat. Oh, I got a recommendation for you actually.
Yeah,
If
of course.
since you like collections of short stories, and one of my patrons is gonna get all happy now.
Awesome.
But her name's Laura Diaz, and the book is called Monstrosity. So if you get a chance, you might want to review that.
Awesome.
She writes a lot of really clever, interesting bits of science fiction and fantasy, and they're all short stories in one big collection.
I would love to read that.
Yeah, she's really good. So, yeah, that sounds like a really cool one. I'm gonna have to check out that time travel one because I've always really enjoyed time travel stories.
Yeah, have you heard of there is this book. It's more like a collection. I just found out about it the other day, and I think it's the Time Traveler's Almanac.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
It has a lot of big names, as in there were some really big people who contributed to it, and it's almost like let me see. There's a way that they describe it, which I have forgotten. I'm quickly gonna search it up.
Okay, cool.
There. It's called The Time Traveler's Almanac, a time travel anthology.
Cool.
And it's how many pages? It's like 1,000 pages.
Oh, wow, that's really
And
big.
yeah, and it is kind of a collection of stories as well. It says on Amazon that the Time Traveler's Almanac is the largest and most definitive collection of time travel stories ever assembled.
Oh, wow. Oh, so has it got like multiple different authors in it then?
It has many authors. It has Isaac Asimov in there and Ray Bradbury in there. William Gibson also contributed to it. There are just lots of people in there.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds like something I'll have to put on my list too.
Yeah. There's so many books to add to the list.
Yeah, that's the thing. So I'm gonna be reading Cynthia. I
Okay.
can't think of her last name. I can't think of her last name. I think it's Cynthia Morgan. Her book is called Dark Fae, and I'm going to be reading that one next. I've been kind of aching for some fantasy, so she's been doing that. So that's the next one on my list. And I just finished The Crimson Deathbringer by Sean Carroll, I think his last name. If any of the authors that I mentioned are hearing this, and I'm bad with names sometimes, so if I'm getting your name wrong, I do apologize. But yeah, it's really good. So like I know you haven't you read Dessa, so but for the people who've read my Justice Keepers books, if you enjoy those, you're going to enjoy The Crimson Deathbringer.
I have noted that one down as well.
Yep.
Thank you.
So did you like, as I know you asked me a bunch of questions from like the interview, but is there anything you kind of wanted to ask me, like burning questions you want to know about
Mm,
like Dessa or anything like that?
I actually want to know more about the Justice Keepers.
Oh, do you?
Yeah.
Okay. So the basic premise of this series is that um well, it opens with this young woman sort of there's a device
Uh-huh.
that nobody quite knows what it does in the first couple chapters. But what it does is like a woman comes through it, and she doesn't speak any English, and nobody knows quite who she is, and she's chasing some guy who came through it about 5 minutes earlier. And these security guards, they try to stop her, and she tries to kind of gently get out of their way, but when they attack her, she kind of kicks their asses and then goes out and chases this guy. And basically, what ends up happening is, so that's Anna. And then the other main character is Jack, and Jack eventually runs into Anna. Anna's not from Earth. Anna is from another world where humans live. And the device she came through is a short-range transportation device. She came through from a ship that was in orbit. And what ends up happening is Jack learns that 10,000 years ago, these aliens that humans only knew as the overseers, they took primitive humans from Earth, like around the time of the Neolithic Revolution. They took a bunch of primitive humans from Earth and they scattered them on different worlds throughout the galaxy. And nobody knows quite why they did it. But various worlds there have different religions involving the overseers. So the Justice Keeper saga is dedicated to exploring the mystery of why the overseers did this. And in addition to that, there's a bunch of political conflicts that come up as the different worlds interact with each other. So now that they've found Earth, so at the beginning of the story, nobody knew where Earth was. Like they didn't know where the original world that humans came from. They didn't know how to find it. So now that they've finally found it, Earth kind of joins the galactic community. But a lot of those worlds have space travel, and we don't have space travel yet. So the Justice Keepers, which are kind of like a police force from one of the more benevolent worlds, Lyria, which is kind of like more of a world that sort of embraces human rights and things like that. The Justice Keepers are from there, and to a large extent, among other things, they have to protect Earth because Earth actually doesn't have the technology to fend for itself from some of the other threats that are out there in the galaxy. And eventually we do. So the first couple books are set on Earth, and eventually we kind of move out and explore the other worlds.
That sounds fascinating.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, and I did the same thing that I did with Dessa. So there's a lot of diverse characters in the Justice Keeper saga.
Is it complete?
Not yet. I'm nearing the halfway point. The Justice Keeper saga is long. Okay. But it's kind of okay, so I'm a lot like Brandon Sanderson, except I did everything in the reverse order of the way he did it. So Brandon Sanderson wrote a bunch of standalone novels so that he could build a name for himself. And then he wrote a big, sprawling epic, which, I mean, I'll probably be finished the Justice Keeper saga in the next 5 years. He'll probably be finished the Stormlight Archive in the next 30 years sometime. But in fairness to the man, one of his books is like just one of his books is the size of 5 of mine. So, but he's working on that, and I'm working on mine. But what ended up happening was, so I don't remember in the interview, did we talk about sort of how I kind of got into writing, things like that? I might know I mentioned a little bit about that. You asked something, but did we go into that, or am I like telling you stuff you already know?
No, you're not.
Okay. Well, and I actually don't think a lot of my listeners know this either. So, what ended up happening with me is around 2011, 2012, my eyesight started getting really bad. And this, among other things, kind of put me into a depression. And I was in a really bad place. And I kind of clawed my way out of there. It felt like literally clawing your way back from hell. And one of the things that did this is I sat down. So when I was in my 20s, I wrote novel after novel after novel, and every single one of them went into the trash. And in fairness, some of them belonged there because they were like my very first work and they weren't that good. But it eventually got to a point where I was doing, okay, but I was still kind of throwing stuff out because I kind of demanded a perfectionism from myself. So uh, I had planned to try to do standalone novels before I did my big, huge space opera epic series. So, but unfortunately, when I got into that depression for about a year, I couldn't write at all. I had like just permanent writer's block, like nothing. And I felt, and it's because I felt emotionally dead inside. So I kind of had to start writing to get myself out of that, in addition to therapy and medication and various other things. So I don't want people who are listening to this to come away saying, oh, writing cures everything. But for me, it was a big step in that direction. And part of what I had to do to kind of get out of that was I had to write about something that I was passionate about. So I wrote my big Justice Keepers book. I wrote the first one, and I didn't really know what I was going to do with it. I had plans for a long series, but then I had surgery on my eye, and while I was recovering from the surgery, I wrote the second one and then the third. And then I just kind of kept going with it because at that point, I kind of was dealing with some self-esteem issues. And finally, about 2 years ago, I said, I have a big series, but it's going to be intimidating for something. So I need to write something smaller that readers can pick up, and if they just want to have like one or two books, they don't have to read the big sprawling epic, and that'll get my name out there a little bit more. So I went back to my plans for Dessa Kincaid, which had been sitting on a shelf for about uh, somewhere in the neighborhood of like 7 years at that point. And I basically just revamped that character and touched up the magic system. And around January of 2008, I started writing it, and I finished it about. I didn't write it all in one stretch. I was in the middle of a Justice Keepers book while I started Dessa, so I wrote the first chapter to kind of feel like to get a feel of what I was doing. And then as soon as I finished that book in April,
Mm-hmm.
starting in May of last year, I did Dessa, and it took from like, so we're pretty much nearing the 1 year anniversary of when I finished writing Dessa. Yeah.
That's awesome. Like I've read about writing being useful, especially when you're trying to like recover, because it just you're able to write your thoughts down.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and I'm glad that it's not just about writing down your thoughts. Sometimes writing is also about just writing the characters that you're thinking about.
Right. Yeah. And you kind of have to see, the thing about it is that like I was trying to, in like around 2008, 2009, I was trying to do let's publish something that will gain a lot of commercial appeal. Um, and then once I'm established, then I can write about the things that I actually want to write about, that I'm passionate about. So I was kind of trying to do like the whole YA, things that were popular at the time,
Hmm.
Twilight, Hunger Games, all that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I like some of those books. Like I love the Hunger Games. Don't get me wrong. I think it's a wonderful book. I love Harry Potter. But that's not what I wanted to write about. So when I got to a point where I was doing it, I was like, okay, you know what? If you're gonna write, you have to write something that you care about, or it's gonna come off as inauthentic. And I was at that point where basically I only had enough creative energy to do the things I was really passionate about. So that's kind of where I started.
Yeah, I feel that stuff like that, which you're kind of forcing yourself to do, they often end up taking a lot more energy.
Yeah, oh, definitely. It's trust me from personal experience. I've got multiple YouTube videos talking about this, but it's when it takes like 10 times as much energy to make yourself do something that you really don't want to do as to something that
Yeah.
you would do on your own. And like, I really like your blog. I've been reading it. I haven't read all of it yet, unfortunately, but I've been reading it. And so I kind of want to help you get that out there a little bit because, frankly, I think you're doing a wonderful job.
Thank you. I was just thinking about that in terms of like the ease of doing things that you're really passionate about.
Yeah,
Because I've been thinking for the last couple months at least that with book blogging, like writing reviews, doing author interviews, they're just so much fun and they don't take as much time as
right.
all the other stuff that I used to write about used to take. And they're different because I was doing a teaching degree last 2 years, and a lot of what I wrote last in the last year was about teaching and learning. And there was so much research that went into it. Even if I was reading one book, I was still learning so much and consulting so many other sources, and it would take me more than a week to write an article.
Really?
Yeah, it would. And now I can usually do it in a night.
That's
But
awesome.
yeah, but I feel that there's a lot more groundwork that happens now. Like I'll read a book, I'll review it on Goodreads, and that's half of my article.
Right.
Then I
Yeah.
write more about it in depth. So it doesn't take as much time. And I guess that's the part about streamlining the whole process of just knowing what I'm doing and the format it is going to be in. But it's fun.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you something. So you are the first person who has like I've had people sort of sing praises for my book, but you were the first person who did that I didn't know first.
Okay.
So, yeah, so that's kind of cool. So I thought, well, since you really enjoyed it, I mean, like, well, first of all, your review was a real big confidence boost. But second of all, I thought since you enjoyed it, it'd be nice to sort of have somebody on who likes talking about these things. Um,
Hmm.
I think you mentioned something to the effect of like you liked the magic system, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
I did.
yeah.
I really liked it.
Yeah, that's I kind of learned that type of magic system writing. That I mentioned Sanderson earlier, and I sort of like so he does magic systems like that too. They're not the same as mine. They're like he has different powers and different things, but he does a very rules based. It's easy to understand. It's
Hmm.
predictable, you know.
I still have to check him out. I have not read any of his books. Have you heard of Terry Goodkind?
I've read a lot of his. You're thinking of the Sword of Truth, right?
I absolutely love that series.
Do you?
Yes.
I think I made it to about Faith of the Fallen,
Okay.
and no, sorry, I went after that. I made it because I remember Jensen showed up. I remember that I read the one with her,
Yeah, I think that's the one with it has sand in there in the name of the book. I think Soul of the Sand or something.
something like that.
Something like
The one the I remember she was her whole thing was that magic didn't work on her.
yes. Yes, and they ended up figuring out like why that was.
Yeah, because something about there's no spark of magic in her or something as there is for other people. I remember that series. I remember and there's one after that, isn't there, with there's a guy and he possesses his whole thing is that he can sort of like detach his soul from his body and watch things remotely. Do you remember what I'm talking about? There's and Richard had to find this stuff. He had drank some poison and they were making him.
Oh, I think that was the Omen Machine.
Oh, was
Um,
it?
I think so. I think that was where he was stuck with some other person, and yeah, I think it was that one. He finished the series. I think when did he finish the last book? Warheart came out in 2015. Um, yeah, and I think Jensen's back in there in Warheart.
That's good. I liked her.
She was good.
The other one, what was I gonna say? The other one that I thought was pretty cool was, have you read the Dresden Files?
Not yet.
You might like that one. That's
Okay.
pretty interesting. And the Codex Alera is by the same author. He's really good. It's Jim Butcher.
Okay.
Yeah, I know. We're basically trading so many different things tonight.
Yeah, that's okay. That happens all the time. There's
Yeah,
always like, and that's the thing, right? Everyone has different tastes, and yet tastes match. And it's amazing, like, especially like we were talking about time travel, and there's so many versions of it. That's the one thing that crosses my mind anytime I read any of those books where we're talking about time travel or how things have changed over time.
yeah, yeah. The time travel ones are interesting. It's funny because did you see the Avengers Endgame movie?
Yep.
Yeah, so I've had a lot of discussions with people basically saying, it's always, Rich, you're a sci-fi nerd. Explain to me how the time travel in that movie works. And I'm like, it doesn't. I think they're going by the multiverse theory in that one.
I think so. But that was what I heard a lot of like criticism about it was that time travel was the shortcut to take. And yeah, I think in some ways I do agree with that. But I don't know. It was neat. It was a good movie. They had to wrap it up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think there's going to be more Avengers, but it's not going to be Steve Rogers and Tony Stark.
Yeah.
And I'm glad for that because I like a lot of the new people that are coming. Like I like T'Challa.
Hmm.
I loved Black Panther. I
Yeah. Oh,
like.
yeah. That his next movie is also coming out. They just announced it. I don't remember when it is out, but that's the third Black Panther, I think.
I think it's the second one.
Or the second one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some good characters in there that would be really neat to explore more.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And the new Spider-Man, the one
Mhm.
that they just came out a couple months ago. I loved it.
Yeah, it was awesome.
And you know who, well, first of all, I love Tom Holland's portrayal of Peter Parker because it's like he's a kid, right? Usually they have an adult playing a high schooler, but the other thing that makes that movie is MJ.
Yes. Yeah, I like this portrayal of MJ more than I liked the last one.
Yeah, me too. She's more of a badass.
Yes.
My one of my favorites. My favorite is when he goes up to her. He's trying to like be all like suave, right? And he goes up to her. He's like, you look really, really pretty tonight. And she looks at him and goes, and therefore I have value.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are good movies.
Good
Are
movies,
you? Are
books.
sorry?
Good movies, good books.
Yeah. Well, this is like the nerd out zone, right? So feel free to nerd out all you like.
Thanks.
Sorry.
No, no. It's good.
But what was I gonna say? Oh yeah, while I've got you here, how's Fiona?
It was good. I think she's hanging out with my partner right now.
Oh, cool, cool. So for those of you who don't know, um, Kriti has in her profile picture a gorgeous cat, and I'm like, oh, that is an awesome cat. Who is that? So I basically asked her about it, and I'm a big cat person, so the neighbor cat has been sort of moving in. He has a house of his own, but he's decided he wants two houses.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah, cats do that.
Yes.
We have a couple visiting us sometimes, and Fiona absolutely hates them to the point that if she could step outside, she would kill them. So,
Well,
yeah, do.
the girl cats are a little more territorial, I think.
Yeah, yeah, I've heard the same.
Whereas the boy cats tend to roam, so as long as they don't like really like try to fight over like food or something, they're pretty much okay with each other.
Hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's what I was gonna ask. Are you excited for Star Wars? Are you a Star Wars person?
I do watch Star Wars, but I haven't been like super enthusiastic about it at least last year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's one of those things where it's like, can we be done with the storyline? Can you write something new for us?
Yeah.
But I'll watch it when it's out. I'll watch it. I'll be in the flow of it and it'll be fine. But I'm probably gonna be excited when I'm at the theater.
Well, the reason I brought it up is because so I agree with you that it was time. So I would have liked it when they did episode 7 a few years ago. I would have liked it if they did something other than just, oh, the Empire's back and it's called the First Order now, right? Like, let's do
Yeah,
something new.
yeah.
So I agree with you that it was a bit too much of a redo of the original trilogy, but then you get the one that came out in 2017, The Last Jedi. And
Mm-hmm.
that one kind of gave me some hope because it was like it was deliberately doing the opposite of everything that you expected. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe they're gonna take it in a new direction. But I saw the trailer from J.J. Abrams, and they're like, you hear like the Emperor go, "Ah, ah, 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 ah," and I'm like, oh God, no, you're just gonna go right back to the same thing that we've seen a bajillion times, aren't you?
Yeah, I think I saw something on Twitter about Dark Ray.
Yeah, I don't like that theory.
Yeah, let's see
What?
what happens over there.
Well, it's funny because the whole Ray will fall to the dark side theory. The reason that the only people I hear that from, to be perfectly honest, are angry men in their late 20s and early 30s. And I think they really don't like, so the basis of the theory is that Kylo Ren will be like he'll become good and Rey will become bad. And I kind of think that that's, well, first of all, I don't ever think they were never really setting that up, but at the end of The Force Awakens, you could maybe think that might happen, but as of the last movie, I'm pretty like as The Last Jedi pretty much stamped out any possibility of that theory happening, but these guys are still clinging to it. And I think the reason that they're clinging to it is because they really want a male hero and not a female hero and like grow up. It's the 21st
Did
century,
we
you know?
not already have the male hero?
Well, they got Finn, right? But
No, I mean like the original Star Wars had Luke
right.
as a male hero.
Yeah, it's amazing though how much people don't like they're sort of they're and it to a large extent it's white guys, but it's not only white guys, but there are some people who really just want um like they're kind of threatened by the idea of lead protagonists not necessarily being white men. And that's, you know, not that cool. And then they do this thing where, like, I remember my friend was telling me, so you know that scene in Avengers Endgame where Captain Marvel takes the gauntlet with the stones, and
Yeah.
then all the girls, like all the female
Oh,
heroes,
yeah, that was a scene that I think everyone noticed.
right?
Yep.
I loved it. I was like, yeah, go for it, right? My friend in the theater with me, so I have an autistic guy that I take out and I help him do stuff in the community. And what he does is he saw that scene and he was like, yeah, go. But like I went like a couple weeks ago, I was having dinner at a friend's place and he was telling me that apparently there were a bunch of men complaining about the fact that for 30 seconds of film time all the female heroes were on screen at the same time. And it's like, get over yourselves, people. You know?
Yeah. No, I think it was a good scene. It was just something that you just notice. It
Yeah.
seemed almost deliberate,
Oh, I'm sure it was.
and it totally was. And I think that would be my only problem with it. But apart from that, I'm totally cool with that scene.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's one of the things that I think, you know, um I think that that the whole dark Ray theory comes out of that idea that they kind of want Kylo Ren because Kylo Ren is a white guy, but like if you kind of look at his character, Kylo Ren is pretty much irredeemable at this point. So I'm sort of thinking that theory is dead.
Mm-hmm. Do you know when it's out? Is it around Christmas?
Around Christmas. I don't know the exact day, probably like the 15th or the 16th or something like that.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll know then. Is that the last one?
For now, I think they're gonna like it's Star Wars, right? And Disney is not gonna stop milking that cash cow. So I think they will eventually do new ones, and I hope that when they do choose to do new ones, that they will do something new. Like
Mm-hmm.
we don't need to have 25 movies about fighting the space Nazis with laser swords.
That's a good way of describing that.
But that's what it is. We're fighting the space
Yeah.
Nazis with laser swords. I don't know. It's one of those like if you like Star Wars, and I'm sorry, I don't forgive me for the shameless self plug, but if you like Star Wars, you probably will enjoy the Justice Keeper saga because it's got like that similar kind of action and politics, but I like to think that I take it in unexpected directions, you know?
I have to check it out.
Thank you. So where are we here? So we're almost at 40 minutes. Um, is there anything like you want to tell us more about your blog or any of the books you think we should check out or anything like that before we wrap this up?
Um, I'm just thankful if you check out my blog.
Yeah.
I have a huge reading list, and I'm trying to. My latest project with my blog right now is to add a calendar to it so that everyone has a little bit of an idea, and I have some idea too about which reviews are coming up next. And hopefully, I'm just hoping that I recently connected with a couple of publishers, and they've started sending me like review copies of books,
Oh,
and that's
wow.
yeah, that is amazing. I got like um, a book mail yesterday, and there was a couple of publishers have like 10 books to read now, which
That's
is
awesome.
too many. Thank you. Um, but yeah, I'm looking forward to reading them, and hopefully, let's see how author interviews go from there. Um, but yeah, lots of new stuff.
What I was going to say, oh, I don't think I got a chance to ask you this. How exactly did you get into book blogging?
Um, what was I doing? I think so. When I finished school, I was looking at ways to like grow my blog.
Right.
Um, I graduated like I think I finished end of April, so I had some time between starting work and um, yeah, just some time on my hands. And I was looking at some places where you could list your blog, and this place I ended up at was called I think it's called a book bloggers list or something. And
Yeah.
that's how I sort of realized that book blogging is a thing. I just never considered doing it before. So since I was going to be on the list, I connected with a couple of people on Twitter who are book bloggers, and I just went from there.
Because I know Henry sent you a copy of mine. Did he like reach out to you or because I'm kind of
Yes,
curious
he
how he
reached out to me.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Uh confession time. I suck at self-promotion. I'm way too self-conscious for stuff like that. So what ended up happening, so I've had like books out for years and people are like, "Oh, this is Rich Penny. He's a new author." I'm like, "No, I was a new author in 2015." But okay, fine, because I've nobody knew I existed because I never did anything to promote them. So what ended up happening was I basically said this, my friend Isabel recommended Henry and she's a an author too. I'm finishing up her book right now, which is called Clarissa's Warning,
I think
and you might want to add that one to your list when you get a chance. But
they're the ones who are running a blog tour now,
sorry,
right? I think they're running blog tours together now. That's Blackthorn Black blog tours. Book.
yeah, you
Yeah,
know her.
I'm part of that too.
Oh, awesome, cool. Yeah, no, Isabel's really neat, and so we did that, and she recommended him. So I was like, oh, the fee is something I can afford. So tell you what, here you go, Henry. Promote my stuff. And apparently after that, people started reading my stuff.
That's
So,
awesome.
because I'm like, me attempting to do it, be like, hi everybody, is everybody good?
No, he was good.
And
He
just
just reached out to me. It was one of the first. I think that was one of the first ones that I got where I
oh
could
yeah.
review it, and yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, well, I'm glad you really liked it. Like, and that was kind of cool because I remember I read your review and it actually made my day, to be perfectly honest with
That's
you.
awesome.
Yeah, and yeah, so I'm glad that you're getting more connections with publishers and stuff. That would probably help you get your stuff out there a little more. I don't know. I'm trying to say positive things, and I don't know enough about the industry to know how it works.
Okay.
But
I just find that I sometimes struggle with that too, where I want to promote myself more, but then I also want to focus on reading, and then it just ends up being like I'm stressed about too many things. So
right, I get it.
yeah, so lately it's just been I just read and I connect with authors and see where I go from there. And it's been really good. I find that um, people want to talk about their work and I want to hear about it. So it's really good.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you very much for doing the interview with me. I'll put for anybody who's listening, I'll put the link to that interview and to Kriti's blog in the description for this video. And I think we're kind of nearing the end point now. So, is there anything you want to say to wrap up?
No, just thank you so much for having me. It was
And
awesome.
thank you so much for coming on because you really made this live stream, well, as it is, a little more interesting. Oh, sorry, is someone talking to you?
No, it's just different room.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Um, so I'm going to bid you a good night now, and thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much.
All right, 1 second. Push